Well, I guess we'll get started here. Welcome everybody that's live and in color and following via webcast. I will sort of make very slow, deliberate introduction so we can wait for a couple others to arrive, but I think we will still probably be okay. I want to first of all thank what a privilege, Representative Devon, the legislature, for all your work. You are the reason I get to introduce two very special individuals that will be representing foster children on this commission. A voice we've always had input from and appreciate it, but now we'll have as a regular voting member of the Indiana Children's Commission. So I want to first introduce, with a round of applause, Stephanie Knight and Dave Rodriguez. And then Dr. Dan, as I call him, Raciniak, try to spell that one. Dr. Dan is our, of course, head of FSSA and follows and was alongside Dr. Jen Sullivan for a long period of time, worked extremely closely through 2020 with the entire administration. So it doesn't feel like you're a new face to me, but you're a new face to the commission. And so we just want to welcome you as well. So welcome, Dr. Dan. We now, I believe, welcome Zach Jackson, our state budget director. He is not new to this. We now have a quorum, I think, to move forward with the business of the day. So thank you for entertaining the slow introduction. We have a consent agenda, which has been emailed to all the members of the commission, which includes the following minutes from the 2021 meeting, appointments, new appointments of co-chairs, which we're very excited about. I won't go through each of them, but we do have more than a few. And then, of course, approving this very lovely, and that's the first time I've seen it in color and in print, the annual report for the Children's Commission. So if I could have a motion to approve the consent agenda. So moved. And a second? All in favor? Aye. All opposed? The agenda is adopted, and we now move to our favorite executive director of state.
Okay, good morning, everyone. First of all, I wanted to apologize that your packets are incomplete. The rest of it is on its way. We had a little mix up with the printing. So those things, those kind of handouts that were on the website, you will have print versions here shortly. In the meantime, I'll just give you a few different updates. These are my 4 topics here, and I'm just going to go through each of them. So this week on Monday, we had the kickoff meeting for phase 2 of our juvenile justice review. You may have seen some items in the media this past week. We did put out a press release with all 3 branches of government about this project. We're really excited about it. And just to kind of give you all a quick overview of the process that's going to happen over the next several months. And some of you are on the task force, or you have members of your staff on the task force. So that Juvenile Justice Reform Task Force, as a reminder to those of you who've been here for a while and new information to those of you who are new, that task force was actually created by this body in February of 2019 at the request of Representative McNamara, and has been working on a preliminary look at the juvenile justice system. We got that report last April, and now, as I mentioned, we're kicking off phase 2. And so what that's going to look like is the task force is going to meet 3 times this fall, in September, October, and November. Our partners at the Council of State Governments Justice Center have been able to make data sharing agreements with several different agencies from throughout the juvenile justice system to get sets of data to analyze. So they're in the process of analyzing data from court case management systems, from the detention records, from Department of Correction, DCS, related as it relates to services for juveniles. So they're looking through all of that. And at the September and October meetings of the Juvenile Justice Reform Task Force, they'll be presenting the findings of their data analysis, part of it in September, part of it in October. And then the other thing that's going to happen is 4 working groups have been formed. I think we might still be adding a few additional folks. But four groups will be diving in even more deeply to that data and working on actual policy recommendations for these 4 different parts of the system. The front end of the system, in other words, how are kids entering the juvenile justice system, and are there kids that we could be diverting, and what are best practices for that? Disposition and out-of-home placement, how are we making those decisions about where to place kids once they come in the system? Services, are we getting them the right services? Are we looking at outcomes? And then the last one is data, which you'll recall if you heard the initial findings of the preliminary assessment. A lot of that was around how our data systems are fairly inconsistent across the state, just a byproduct of the fact that it's a county-based system, and so things happen a little differently in different areas. But we're going to have a working group looking at, are there ways that we can kind of at least harmonize the ways that we're collecting data across the state so that we can better measure our inputs, our outputs, and our outcomes. And then finally, sort of from that whole process, at the November meeting of that Juvenile Justice Reform Task Force, we will have, that's going to be an all-day meeting, and those 4 working, well, 3 of the working groups probably, no, maybe data as well, will be presenting policy recommendations to the task force for discussion, consensus building, and ideally kind of broad-based agreement on what we want to move forward, whether that be in legislation, in agency policy, or simply in kind of some best practices we want to promote. So similar to what we do here in terms of thinking about policy broadly, it could be in any of those categories. You know, there may be a bill, there's likely to be a bill that comes out of this process. But again, the goal is for it to be very consensus-based with all the stakeholders at the table, really looking at our Indiana data as well as national research on what works. And what works to what purpose. We're looking at 3 things: what gives better outcomes for youth, what protects public safety, and what is the best use of our public resources. So if we can find ways to achieve those 3 results, and by legislative change, policy change, et cetera, that's the purpose of what we hope to come out of this. Because the policy proposals will be presented to the task force in November, then the plan would be then when this group meets in December that we'll have them presented here for your December meeting. Any questions on that juvenile justice review? I'm really excited by the breadth of people that we have working on it. Like I said, people from across the system, across the state, small counties, large counties, you know, rural, suburban, urban, every part of the state. So hopefully we can really get to some good broad-based agreement on how to do better. My next update is, yeah, some of you have heard about this before. We have a little planning committee that's working on planning something called the Family and Youth Engagement Summit. Family Yes for short. And this is a project that started last year actually with support from Casey Family Programs. We ended up postponing it till this year because the group really wanted to do it in person. We weren't able to do that last year. So we're hoping for an in-person event in October. And what I have here on the slide is a broader vision. Well, first of all, youth and family voice is one of our overarching principles as a Children's Commission, right? That we adopted in our most recent strategic plan. It's part of the reason why Stephanie and Day are here. And this Family Yes Summit is another expression of that. We know that if we are trying to have policies and run programs that are good for kids and families, then they're going to be better if we hear from those kids and families, right, about their experience. And so that's the whole purpose behind the youth and family voice. And then our little planning committee, when we got it together, we said, what would family engagement in state systems actually look like? Like, what's our vision? And the group came up with that vision statement that youth and family are involved in all aspects of systems, including, and this kind of was a surprise to me, but it made a lot of sense when they said it, planning, budgeting, and evaluating services. So not just saying, here's my experience and this might be a better program, but how are we actually doing all those administrative parts of the programs and including family and youth voice in that. They talked about transparency and accountability of our systems to the families and youth that they serve, that were trauma informed, that were promoting healing and resilience throughout our services to vulnerable kids and families. That we recognize that families are the experts on their own lives, and we value their voices. And finally, that they have some information and understand how to approach legislators or agencies, right? And get involved in the policy process should they want to do that. So that's kind of the big vision for the family engagement broadly. And then the event itself, we have a kind of a purpose statement and some specific goals. We want to educate our state workers, our policymakers, as well as local service providers about youth and families experiences. We want to stimulate some positive change in our systems that serve youth and families, and then also empower youth and families as advocates. So that's kind of the purpose of the event. You can see the goals there. I won't go through those in detail, but I'm going to tell you a little bit about the plans for how that event is going to run. So the dates are October 22nd and 23rd. Again, I'm really hoping that we'll be in good shape, or good enough shape by then to have a safe in-person event. We're planning to hold it over here at Indiana Government Center, making wise use of those resources. That is a free space that's available to us, so we're going to have it there. It's a Friday and a Saturday, and the plan is for the Friday portion of the event, the audience is us. It's our state workers, it's our local service providers, right? It's all the professionals who serve youth and families. And the speakers on that day will be youth and families. So it's really people who will be telling their stories to folks who work from the state, who will be kind of absorbing that, discussing that, talking about what they can learn for their own practice or policy. And then the Saturday portion of the event is geared for an audience of families, and it's more geared towards kind of building their own skills around telling their story, finding resources, advocating. And I may be reaching out to some of you to see if you are interested in helping to participate on either day of that. As I mentioned, we have a grant from Casey Family Programs to put this event on. That's allowing us to make sure that we're providing childcare for the families on Saturday that come, as well as stipends for those who speak. So, recognizing and valuing their time in coming and helping to educate us. And I already mentioned the volunteer planning committee. So that's coming October 22nd, 23rd, save the date. There'll be more detailed information coming out in the next couple of weeks, including a registration. Any questions on that? Okay, next piece, vulnerable youth dashboard. And this is something that I'm bringing to you on behalf of our data sharing and mapping committee. This is an idea that was presented to you all by Tyler Brown of NPH, who's one of the co-chairs of that committee. Sometime last year, I think, Tyler presented this idea, and he showed you all an example of a dashboard that Kentucky has that shows visually different parts of the state and different vulnerable youth populations. And so that committee, and really very closely in conjunction with NPH, is working on developing something like that for us here in Indiana. So specific to our youth and our vulnerable youth as defined in the Children's Commission statute, which as a refresher is children who are served by DCS, FSSA, Department of Correction, or juvenile probation. That's our vulnerable youth population of interest. And so Tyler and NPH and the committee are working on pulling together a group. He's got a project charter going in your packet. I think you all have the rest of the packet now. There's an excerpt from that project charter. It's still a little bit in development, so I didn't print the whole thing. But the main thing that I want you all to know is the purpose of it is in there. And then also we've identified a group of data and subject matter experts from across the agencies who we think would really be key to helping shape that project. So some of those are folks who work for you. So if you would support their participation in that, that would be really helpful. Many of those folks are already closely involved in our data sharing committee, some not so much. So anything you can do to kind of help their participation. And once that kind of gets off the ground and we have some more concrete plans, we can continue to update this group as that work moves forward. I do know that, and I'm sure you all are aware, NPH just this week, or the governor's office, released the disparities data portal for the state. So we have that available now, which is wonderful. So we'll make sure that this work obviously doesn't duplicate that work, but that it's something that's kind of harmonized with that and complements that work. Any questions on the vulnerable youth dashboard? And last but not least, actually, never mind, because we decided not to apply for that grant. So you can forget about that topic. Okay, next on the agenda, we have.
Welcome.
Amber Becker. I serve as the co-chair alongside Dr. Zachary Adams on the Childhood Trauma and Resiliency Committee. He wanted me to send you guys his regrets because he is currently close contact. It's okay. He's currently close contacted, so I apologize. It was short notice that this happened. So I'm going to do my best to fill in. So the Childhood Trauma and Resiliency Committee has previously provided clarifying definitions to trauma and trauma-informed care, as well as a position statement cautioning against inappropriate use of the adverse childhood experience scores. The committee recognized that additional guidance would be beneficial for those who are considering measuring child trauma and adversity through other means. With this in mind, the committee developed this brief document that you have in front of you today that outlines key terms, noting important considerations, and it provides practical resources for information, such as a guidance on how to approach the process of designing a plan. And then we also incorporated links to specific validated measurement tools. So the guide in front of you today is titled Measurement of Child Trauma and Adversity, Terminology and Resources, and our committee would just ask permission to adopt.
We have a motion to adopt the one page. All in favor of adopting? Aye. All opposed?
Thank you so much.
Next up, I believe we have our, Alicia's going to give us our data update. Is that right, Julie?
Yep.
Okay. Welcome.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak with you all and provide an update on data related to the Commission's strategic plan. And thanks to Julie for her assistance and for reaching out to Indiana Youth Institute to work with us on this. There we go. Great. So just a brief introduction about IYI. If you're unfamiliar, we are an intermediary that supports youth-serving professionals and organizations across the state. And we have been in operation in Indiana for about 30 years. And we also serve as the Kids Count affiliate for the Amy Casey Foundation. So one of the ways you probably know us is through our annual data book. And you probably know me by pestering you around our annual data book. So this is an excellent extension and also an excellent intersection between the work the Commission does, as well as the work of IYI. So we have prepared some updated data to give some overview in terms of where the state is aligned to the 4 strategic goals of the Commission's strategic plan. So the first one, the first data point we're going to look at is infant mortality, looking at both the number of infants who have passed, as well as the rates. And the good news here is that, as you can see, it peaked, and then that has slowly decreased over the past few years, hitting a low for the first time, I think, since 2012, at a rate of 6.5 for every 1,000 live births. One piece, though, around this is we do want to look at disaggregated data as much as we can. The overall rate is excellent to see, but there are some discrepancies, some disparities we see when we look at data by gender, as well as by race and ethnicity. So the first chart on the left of the slide is looking at the number of deaths by gender, and as you can see, male babies were dying at a higher number, but then there is they have come together and now at a similar number as of 2019. And that's only of those that we know. So if you do that math, it may be a little lower than the total number, but that may not be, we just may not have the full picture and the full data of all the babies' genders. The one area that our state does have to grow in is looking at infant mortality by race and ethnicity. So while our overall rate has decreased, and even looking at it disaggregated, the overall rates based on race and ethnicity have decreased, we still see some stark disparities by race and ethnicity in terms of infant mortality. Specifically for Black babies in Indiana, they are nearly twice as likely to die based on their rates than the overall rate, as well as looking at white babies and Hispanic babies. So there's definitely some work we as a state need to continue to do there. And then relatedly, maternal mortality, similarly for African-American mothers, is also higher than their peers. And please stop me if there are any questions or clarifications I can offer at any time. Happy to to pause as needed or wait to the end, whatever is easiest. So next, we're looking at substantiated child abuse and neglect by race. And as you can see, interestingly, when disaggregating this by race and ethnicity, the subgroup that has the highest number of reported and substantiated cases is those children who are 2 or more races. One thing to note is this data does end at 2019. We did see a dip there in 2020 in terms of reported and substantiated cases. We don't think that's because there were fewer cases occurring, but because kids were at home, they were not able to be visibly assessed. It's hard to assess a kid who is hungry or dirty via Zoom. So while there may be fewer cases that we see when we look at the 2020 data, if anything, the rate of maltreatment may have increased due to the stress of COVID, but the number of reported cases did decrease. So that's just a COVID impact that we're keeping our eye on. And as kids start to return to school now and in the future, we do anticipate seeing those numbers start rebounding. So the next data point we wanted to take a look at is children and ACEs, or adverse childhood experiences. And this first came about in the late 1990s as a public health metric as part of kind of the overall social determinants of health, to see what are those experiences that kids are having in childhood that are creating negative health outcomes later on in life. So while this is not a permanent or end all be all in terms of an indicator of the data, it is just one metric that can be used to look at prevention and intervention methods for kids later on in life. So as you can see, Indiana, as a overall, we do tend to have a higher rate of ACEs or adverse childhood experiences in our state when compared to the nation, which coincides with our higher rate of child maltreatment and neglect. And as you can see, most children in Indiana will experience at least one ACE or one adverse childhood experience. And then fewer children will experience 2 or more. And of course, the more ACEs you have, the higher likelihood for potential negative outcomes later in life, such as poverty, obesity, as well as other serious illnesses.
Sorry.
Yeah,
So the top line there is actually children with no ACEs,
correct.
and around 58%, so the majority have none.
The majority of none, yes. And around about 22, I believe, yeah, around 22% had at least one or more, which is higher than the national average. So our next data point is looking at a ratio of mental health providers. And this is a positive data point, even though the number is decreasing and it looks like it's sloping down. That's a good thing. We want the ratio to be smaller, because that means there are more mental health providers in relation to the population. So as you can see, overall, Indiana has seen an increase in mental health providers, which has resulted in a smaller ratio. However, when we do look in some of our more rural counties in Indiana, this ratio does increase, and there are some pockets where there is less access to mental health providers. We see a similar situation with primary care physicians, where there are some counties in Indiana where there is one primary care physician for the entire county, which can limit access and availability for children and families to those services. So next we're looking at youth who had a major depressive episode and did not receive mental health services. Again, even though the line is trending upward, this is a positive, because when you look at the rankings, first is usually best and 50th is worst. So you want to be closer to first as much as you can. So the fact that we have improved is a positive. So we have fewer kids who are experiencing a depressive episode and not receiving mental health or any kind of health service, which translates to we have more kids who are experiencing a depressive episode and receiving some kind of mental health treatment. So this is another area for positivity and that we're seeing in terms of a trend in our state.
I don't know that I need this mic or if it's even live. This is my normal speaking voice. I'm not even trying to elevate at this point. But just a point of clarification, because this is such an important topic for our state and country. Can you define a mental health provider as you use it for your research?
Sure. So mental health provider is not necessarily defined by IYI, but the County Health Rankings and Roadmap Organization. And this is any kind of provider that does any kind of mental health treatment. So that could be anything from a psychiatrist, a psychologist, even a social worker, a licensed social worker who provides counseling. But it's some kind of licensed professional who provides mental health treatment in some way. So maybe not, it wouldn't be a primary care physician, even though they can prescribe medication. Would be someone who is specialized in mental health care and treatment. And licensed, yes.
And I think that's the big point. They have to be licensed. So as we see some additional wraparound within our schools, we're not talking about school counselors here. We're talking about licensed mental health providers. Okay,
Correct.
thank you for that clarification.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dr. Gooden. So moving on to strategic goal number 3, this is focused primarily on education and educational outcomes for Indiana youth. So one area that we are seeing a positive trend is early education enrollment. So we have seen more kids enrolling in early education in the state, even though as a state as a whole, we are lagging when it comes to our neighboring states, as well as the rest of the country. We rank, according to the Casey Foundation, 41st. Again, keeping in mind first is best, 50th is worst. We rank 41st when it comes to early education enrollment, and that's children ages 3 and 4. So we're really thinking pre-K or early Head Start, or not childcare necessarily, but really early education, early learning. And again, when looking at our neighboring states, we're slightly higher than Kentucky in terms of our percentage, and we're hovering around 40 to 41% of kids ages 3 and 4 enrolled in some kind of early learning or early education program. One anomaly that Julie and I were talking about earlier is this dip in Head Start enrollment in 2018. I wish I could have an explanation for you all this today as to what happened in 2018. I mean, we do see that rebound in 2019. I would have to reach out to my colleagues at FSSA and to see if they maybe had a better explanation, but that is something that is a little off, since we have seen kind of this upward trend in terms of early education enrollment. So next, we're looking at young children who are enrolled, or excuse me, who are not enrolled in early education or early education, an early education program or early learning. And as you can see, the percentage of students or the percentage of the youth ages 3 and 4 who are not enrolled is Hispanic. Those are the kids that are the subgroup of our population who are not enrolled at the same rates as other youth in our state. One area of positivity is that we are seeing a higher rate of Black children who are ages 3 and 4 enrolled in early care in our state. So that is an area that we can definitely celebrate as a win for our state as a whole.
Alicia,
Yeah.
just a quick question.
Sure.
Do we know where we stand? I understand that we're lagging behind on the early education. What about the rate of increase, percentage increase? You looked across that. I mean, obviously these are good trends. They're not going the other way. You mentioned a dip to kind of explain that, but ultimately most of them are pointing up. Have you looked at that at all, or could you look at that?
I haven't examined the rates themselves. I know historically we have been kind of in that 40th ranking rate.
Just as a static number,
Yes.
right? I guess what I'm kind of wondering, just how we, that's what our incline looks like compared to other states. Because I think that'd be instructive.
Yeah,
because I think
absolutely. Yeah,
we know
happy
we've
to follow
got
up
ground
on
to
that.
make up, but we think we're doing a pretty good job. Thank you.
Absolutely, yes. Representative Vaughn, yes.
Thank you. So when I see the percentages, I know we have about 1.1 million students in Indiana today.
Mhm.
So when I see the percentages, the numbers kind of make me nervous when I hear 1.1 and then I see this, that we're about 60% on average of
So
kids
this
enrolled.
is only children ages 3 and 4. So not the
Okay.
full 1.1 million, which is all
Thank you.
kids in K-12. So this is only a small subset. So again, still not the highest numbers, but not as dire
Okay,
as
that's
necessarily as looking at the.
Well,
that
I
1.1,
didn't
yes.
see the 3 and 4 there. And that just
Yeah.
made me nervous there.
Yeah, I should have included that in the slide. I apologize. Yeah.
However, I think he does Senator Bonnie make a good point, because while we have 1.1 million we're serving in all school types in Indiana, when we break that down by cohort and think about age 3 and age 4, we're looking at 85 to 90,000 children in each age group. So statistically, when we do that mental math, or some of us need to pull out a calculator, right? I mean, it still is, I think what John was alluding to, while we're growing, still a call to action to keep improving that early learning space, especially, and very intriguing about the Hispanic students. So thank you for that.
Absolutely. And again, when you look at pockets of the state to see where are students enrolling in early learning, we do see some deficits in specifically the region. So near Lake County and in that area, and that is a high concentration of Hispanic Hoosiers living there. So there could be some overlap in that sense. A hypothesis, no, I don't have hard data to support this, is there could be some issues with work, and that there could be some problems in terms of securing children early learning access and juggling work responsibilities for single parents, or even with both parents working. So to Dr. Digger's point, yes, if you're thinking about 85, 90,000 kids, we're still less than half are enrolled in an early learning program at age 4. But it is improving.
Yeah, if you have the ability to look, I'd also consider looking at transportation, particularly in single car families.
So
Can we
another,
pause there, Dr. Dan? Can you also look at, let's just get the action item. Let's
Sure.
really going. Can you also look at, and this is probably a question for FSSA, like working together, but the types of quality providers that we have. The reason I say this is with all of the ESSER dollars flowing into schools, there's a lot of discussion about how a local school, again, regardless of school type, might serve that 3 and 4-year-old student. And so with that growing population, it would be interesting to also kind of track the provider as well.
yeah, so again, I don't have the numbers off the top of my head in terms of the breakdown of providers on the path to quality, and I'm happy to follow up. One thing we do know is that while we have very few overall childcare deserts in this state, we do see larger pockets without that high quality provider. So while access for overall, in terms of just geography, isn't as big of an issue for Indiana, access to high quality early learning, which we know is what sustains the benefits for kids in terms of academics and social emotional learning past grade 3, is where we're seeing some discrepancies around the state, specifically in our rural areas. There's a deficit of high quality. Again, there are providers, but they may not be that 3 or 4 on the path to quality providers. So yeah, and please, if there's more, just keep giving me more stuff. I'm more than happy to follow up on additional topics. So our next topic, and again, this is another area of positivity, is looking at our grade level promotion and retention rate overall. As you can see, it's been pretty static in terms of retention, around 4%, with promotion around 96%, which is, again, that is a positive. We do know there's a lot of research out there that shows retention doesn't have the benefits that initially thought when back in like the 80s that we thought it might have for kids. That repeating a grade doesn't necessarily improve the outcomes. It's really more about the instructional scaffolding and differentiation. So retention isn't the solution we had hoped, I guess, back in the 80s that we thought it would be. So a lower retention rate is definitely a positive for the state. And when we look at this disaggregated, excuse me. Oh, I didn't include that, I'm sorry. But when we do look at it disaggregated by race and ethnicity for retention rate, we do see initially there were some discrepancies again based on race and ethnicity, with a higher retention rate of our Black and Hispanic students. And we have seen that decrease over the past few years. In 2019, the overall rate was pretty similar across all subgroups, which again is a positive. So we're not seeing huge swings in disproportionality in terms of who is being retained in grades. Our next topic is looking at exclusionary discipline practices. So in-school and out-of-school suspension, as well as expulsion. And one thing about exclusionary disciplinary practices that we know is that there's a strong correlation between exclusionary discipline and a future likelihood to be justice involved. And this is, it's interesting, the Federal Reserve is coming out with a report that it's not just those kids that are experiencing the discipline, but if I am a student who attends a school with a high suspension rate or a high expulsion rate, even if I myself may not be suspended or expelled, I still will have a higher likelihood of being justice involved in my future. So we do know that common term, the school to prison pipeline, there is a lot of research supporting this, supporting the correlation between exclusionary discipline practices and future justice involvement. I did want to give to Representative Devon's earlier point, looking at our 1.1 million kids, these numbers that you see may look high. So I did want to provide the percentages as well as the raw numbers. So overall in the state, we have about a 3.8 in-school suspension rate, 5.1 out-of-school suspension rate, and then a 0.2% expulsion rate. So the expulsion rate's again an area of positivity that we can celebrate. One thing I do want to clarify though is when you break this out by county and by school district, we do see some higher numbers in certain school districts and in certain counties, specifically our urban counties. We do see specifically suspension rates closer to 8 or even a little closer to 9%. One thing is, again, we did see a decrease in 2020, specifically for in-school and out-of-school suspension. That is probably due to COVID and due to kids being at home. It's hard to do in-school suspension if you're doing virtual learning. So it's hard to know if that number is an anomaly or if the trend that we had seen before COVID, if you look at 2017, 2019, it was starting to trend upwards with more students experiencing out-of-school suspensions. So we'll have to see this year if that's something we return to, or if COVID has that impact to continue to see that downward turn. So looking at exclusionary discipline by gender, and this probably isn't a surprise, but males in Indiana tend to have higher disciplinary experience higher disciplinary practices than females in Indiana. And specifically, when we look at micro subgroups, so looking at the intersection of race and ethnicity and gender, we know that Black males in Indiana experience the highest rates of specifically out-of-school suspension in a disproportional impact based on their overall population representation. So this is looking at exclusionary discipline by race and ethnicity, and this is where we start to see some real discrepancies and disproportionality. And this is, I would say, an area for growth for our state. And we know nationally that this is an issue, but we do want to address this in our state, given the size of our subgroups in terms of our race, or in terms of race and ethnicity. We do see higher percentages or higher rates of Black students, specifically Black males, experiencing exclusionary disciplinary practices, so out of school, in school suspension, as well as expulsion. And we see that happening higher than they are in terms of their overall population representation. So even in districts or in counties where there's not a huge Black population of students, they're still receiving a higher percentage or higher rate of exclusionary discipline compared to their peers. So that's showing us that something is occurring. It's not with the students, but something's occurring with the system that is targeting these kids, or that these kids are experiencing higher rates. And it could be, there's a lot of research that shows that kids that are Black or Hispanic may receive harsher punishments for the same infractions as their peers, as well as just overall conditions may lead certain kids. We're seeing suspension and expulsion happening younger in kindergarten and pre-kindergarten, which then sets kids up for us on a path to experience that later in life.
I have a question about your categories of race.
Yes, ma'am.
It's multiracial or two or more races. Do you see a predominant race that stands out in that multiracial category?
That's an excellent question. It's hard to know because when the census breaks that out, as well as so we get this data specifically from the Indiana Department of Education. I don't believe if you classify yourself as multiracial or two or more races, I don't believe you have to declare which races you are. I think you just state that you are more. So it's hard to know, and the same is true for census. When you say you're two or more, I don't believe you have to state which ones that you're comprised of. So it's hard to know. But it's an excellent research question. I wish I had a better answer. So.
No, it's okay. Thanks.
Yes, ma'am.
I guess my question is, if we see that race is one of the issues, do it have anything training wise, even for like teachers or people that deal with children in general, to broaden the racial equity on behalf of teachers or something like that?
Yeah, so we don't know exactly, at least it's not, the data is not reported in terms of the race of the teacher who is doling out the punishment. We do know overall that Indiana's teacher diversity is lagging behind its overall student population. So we do have a more diverse student populace than we do have teachers. And even in places like Marion County, Lake County, where we have where it's a majority minority population, we still see a very small overall teacher diversity. So Lake County, for example, I believe over 60% of the students in Lake County are not white. And yet, and this is our county with the highest percentage of teacher diversity, the teacher diversity is only 24%. So even though that is the top of our state in terms of concentrated teachers who are non-white, it's still paling in percentage to, or in comparison to the student population. So that is an area I would say we do have to grow. We do see, there's a lot of research out there around the benefits of having non-white teachers in classrooms for both Black students, Hispanic students, and white students, that there's benefits in terms of academics, definitely school disciplines, as well as expectations.
I guess my question was, even if we do have like white teachers, do we have any training that would prepare all teachers, no matter what color they are, for all children? Basically, say if I was a Black teacher, but I needed more education on what would go on in a household of a white child, so that I know better as their teacher how they learn, stuff like that. Do we have some type of training like that for teachers?
Dr. Jenner,
Yeah, I figured that was eventually gonna get over here. Well, first of all, great question. And I think as you were speaking, a lot of different thoughts were certainly going through my mind about, you know, how might we make sure all schools have this good information. And one of the things that even Alicia said in her comments is, it sounds like the data is further even disaggregated by school corp. And so there are some school corps who are providing strategic interventions differently than others. And so I think a big question that's going through my mind is, how might we look at that data and see, okay, is it a statewide, or is it some specific focus on some individual school corporations to make sure they have the good information, and again, the strategic intervention to help make sure we're doing the best for all kids, including our Black students. So again, my mom's going with questions as well, just like yours, but I think you bring up a really good point. Thank you.
I can help add to that a little bit. I know 2 years ago, we had a bill that dealt with trauma training for teachers that were going to go to school to be a teacher. And then last year, we put it into law that they can use the trauma training for growth points as well, for the continuing education. So we may check with the higher education groups to see, because trauma helps the child that's in the class that's maybe disrupting it, and maybe helping the teacher help manage her classroom better. But I don't know if it deals with the things that we're concerned about here.
One other thing, you talked about the longitudinal, you talked about the longitudinal link, right, of these students post with the gosh, you said it specifically, and I wrote it down, with a strong correlation to be future justice involved. There's also longitudinal data that can be back mapped. Even when we talk about strategic intervention, it can even be, like, for example, literacy. Making sure our Black students can read, right? Because some of the behaviors, some of the disruptive behaviors can even be caused by what did or did not happen in the past. So again, great question. And I know you have a lot of, we could talk about this topic all day long.
Absolutely.
That's a good question.
I'll ask today's question, maybe a simpler way, just for me. Are there resources that DOE, Department of Education, provide to individual schools that are struggling and do need training Teachers require that training, or are schools sort of doing this on their own, school corporation by school corporation, or some mixture of both? If there are materials or things that we do provide, can we share that with some members of the commission?
Yeah, so any materials that we do provide as a state, districts have the option to use or not. And in some cases, they use state resources, in some cases, they bring in their own local curriculum. And then on your note with Kara Herring, who is our state's chief inclusion, equity, and opportunity officer, our DOE team is also working closely with her to think about, again, how we might arm schools with good information, good resources, to take a look at several different indicators, including this one, that we need to continue to improve upon.
And I think, oh, I'm sorry. Was someone else about to-
I was about to say something really quick. Okay, so it's interesting that you said that they have the option to choose. I guess my question is, with this commission, when you guys say that, we could possibly like propose bills or something like that, if I'm not mistaken, would we do something to where it's like required? I don't know if you guys have ever been through child advocates training, but they have this really, really, really amazing racial, it's called Interrupting Racism for Children. And it just breaks down, even for myself, so many subconscious bias that we might have, that you are unaware of. And I just sort of think that it would be really great. Like, what if it was like required for teachers, because they work with children, or anybody in the state that will work with children, if that's what you want to do, it should be required that you have all training necessary for all children. And so just, I guess, utilizing the resources that we have already, implementing it all together so that can all work out. Just wondering if we as a commission could do something to where like it was mandatory, because what if they choose not to, but they're a district that really needs it,
So within, and I don't have the law pulled right up in front of me, but there is within the law cultural competency requirements for schools. And then, of course, we do have a list as educators of required training that the General Assembly has put into law that we as educators have to do. I don't know if Senator Devon has anything else to add. I think he's our lone General Assembly member here today, so no pressure. Senator Grooms,
Well, for
yes,
changing roles, Representative Grooms.
Yeah.
So I didn't know I got a promotion to be called senator, but
Yeah.
but anyway, so there is, and a lot of things as legislators, we get beat on a lot by teachers, is that we put a lot of requirements on them. And so we're very careful on things. So this trauma training, that's where we started it at teacher preparation. So they have a semester while they're learning to go to school to become a teacher. They have to have some type of trauma training, class management, and how to deal with children that maybe disrupt the classroom to help that child succeed, but help them succeed in the classroom is real because the average teacher only lasts 5 years. Right? And so we put a lot of requirements on the teachers, and that's something we got to walk that fine line on, is how do we recruit good people to be teachers that can deal with certain situations that erupt in a classroom and to keep them in the classroom, right? So it's not just always focused on the child, but we have to focus on the teacher as well and give them the tools that they need to succeed. And so that's something that we're always fighting that battle. And so, and that's where with these growth points, that they have to have so many years of after school learning, right? That they have to continue some continuing education courses. And that's something that we're working on as well. So we're trying to walk a fine line to keep teachers in the classroom because we're struggling to get teachers right now, but yet to put them in the right frame of mind when they're there. So that's something, if anybody got ideas, we're always open.
I do think this is a two-pronged issue. It's both looking at the preparation of teachers in college. So as I'm a former teacher, I was alternatively trained, so I didn't major in education. I went through a different program. But even in my alternative program, but also in colleges of education, there probably needs to be more of this kind of emphasis, I would say. So we're not just waiting until someone's already in the classroom, which is in-service training, but we're doing that pre-service. So before someone even enters the classroom or starts their student teaching or residency, this is embedded. So I don't want to just focus on what's happening with teachers who are already in the classroom, but we also need to think about the pipeline as well.
So I'd say there's a third intervention.
Oh, yeah.
Which is maybe less upstream, but I think we actually may have more control over, and that is, I used to represent families navigating the school discipline process when I was a practicing attorney, and there is such a wide discrepancy in both the resources and ability of families, especially families, low-income families of color, in terms of navigating that school. You get this giant packet, which is boilerplate, lays out your rights, but it's incomprehensible to most lay people. And it's less upstream, obviously. You're not talking about the root causes or teacher training or teacher attitudes. But in some ways, and one thing I'd encourage the commission to take a look at, if you already haven't, is sort of the ability to put navigators or peer navigators in particular in place to help families navigate this system. Because I'm sure there's research on it about the discrepancy between an individual that's represented even by not like a lay person sort of advocate versus somebody that's navigated on their own. So yeah.
And one data point we don't have today, but I've spoken with Julie about us collecting and examining in the future, is looking at discipline practices by special education and general education as well. And also looking at the intersection of race and gender there too. Because we do know that special education students as a whole do experience some exclusionary discipline practices at a higher rate. That it's usually a behavior issue. It could also, that could fall under their IEP, but they still may be experiencing suspension or expulsion. But it would be interesting for us as a state to see the intersection that we know we have two populations that are experiencing higher rates. If I'm someone who's in both of those populations, what is happening to me? So that's something that's a future data analysis piece that we look to do in partnership with the commission.
And Day, I know you know this because Julie does a great job at all the onboarding and the orientation. Part of what drives a lot of our work on the commission are these individual groups where we have a lot of work going on outside of this room with people that are not necessarily seated on the commission. That includes a group that we're going to hear from next, which is the equity, inclusion, and cultural competence. So what we might do as an action item, just follow up on this, propose is take the data that prompted your question, which is who's doing what well, and then maybe they can look into specific trainings that seem to be working for different parts of the state, and then maybe just talk about the practice, what they're doing practically. The training you mentioned worked really well. You were very impressed with it, and maybe works well in certain parts of the state and work certain school districts. Others. So if we could try to work on that, Julie, for something that's maybe an action item where we could have some success stories from around the state to talk about the specific training that teachers are getting and maybe why they think it's working.
Yeah, and
Which
actually,
eventually would help with some of these overall numbers that I think prompted your question. So I think you're raising very strong practical.
we do have a resource from the equity committee on just generally recommended trainings on equity, inclusion, and cultural competence. It's not specific to schools, but you all did approve a list of ready trainings last year. That's on our website.
The other thing I think we really have to be mindful of as a state is schools cannot do this alone.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
And I've said that on repeat, and I'll keep saying that. The power of what's happening in some local communities, building synergy, whether it's around student pathways, whether it's around strategic interventions, locals have to drive that, and it has to be schools plus my colleague over here, Department of Child Services, plus FSSA services, plus health. Dr. Box is not here. We saw that Black students were not in person as much last year. They were more hybrid or virtual. I mean, there are a lot of implications that all converge on this, which is the other power of this commission, is we're not on an island. We're all working together. And yes, I did promote Representative Devon. Let me just clear that up. Strike all records where I said Senator This is our lone senator representative. All right.
I feel like John's giving you the hook a little bit, so I'm gonna keep us going.
We've got a little time, so I think we're okay.
Okay.
And I gotta ask a quick question too on that is social or poverty levels, is there a way to determine that threshold of the?
Absolutely, absolutely. We could definitely look at income levels in both, again, looking at that as its own factor in terms of exclusionary discipline. But then my encouragement would be to look at the intersections, looking at it that micro subgroup. So looking at the intersection of income and race, or income and gender. For a discipline, we're seeing those discrepancies more with race. In other areas, we see in other areas of education specifically, or in health access, it is more focused on income or again, special education and ability. So looking at those intersections. So if I had someone who's in both populations, what's happening to me may be a little more acute or more intense than someone who's just in one of those populations. So absolutely, income is definitely a factor in poverty. In terms of that, one of the average childhood experiences is poverty and living in poverty, living in violence. All these things play together and create the outcomes we see later on. So I'm gonna keep us moving again, just because I'm feeling that little pressure of time. But so our next data point that we're gonna look at is high school graduation rates. So this is slide 15, and as you can see, we are again doing pretty well in terms of overall grad rate as a state. We did see a little bit of a dip in terms of, actually the grad rate, I'm sorry, was the same. Our dropout rate did see an increase in 2019-2020. Our dropout rate increased to 7.2%. The previous year was about 5.7%. Again, it's hard to know if that is an anomaly due to COVID, or if we are seeing an increase in dropouts just overall. So this year will help kind of clarify if this is a trend or if that was just a one-time issue. And then we do see some discrepancies when we look at gender and graduation rates, with our male students graduating at a lower rate than our female students. And again, we do see the similar situation when we look at graduation rates by race and ethnicity, with certain subgroups having a higher overall graduation rate and other subgroups having a lower overall graduation rate. And when we look at the inverse and look at dropout rates, we see basically the opposite of this. So for our Black students specifically, who have the lowest graduation rate, that's that line right at the bottom, when you look at the inverse of dropout, unfortunately, they have the highest dropout rates. One thing I do want to mention, I know Dr. Jenner's department is working on this. When we look at dropouts and graduation rate combined, we're missing about 5% of the cohort. So we only know about 95% of students, if they are graduating or dropping out. That 5%, we're just not sure. It could be that they're becoming super seniors. It could be that they're getting a certificate of completion, or what will be an alternative diploma, or they could be getting exited out under some different code. We just don't know at the moment. So our last topic is for strategic goal number 4 is juvenile, looking specifically at the juvenile justice system and looking at juvenile case filings by type. And again, we're seeing a decrease both across delinquency and a slight increase in status offenses in 2019, but still we're seeing a decrease from 2015 when it was hit a high of about 4,100. So this is a positive, and then overall we are seeing in terms of students who have been committed, or excuse me, youth who have been committed to Indiana's Department of Correction, we are seeing a decrease in that as well. So another area of positivity for our state. However, when we look at the data disaggregated by race and ethnicity, we again see disproportionality and discrepancies. So looking at just the raw numbers, you would think, and again, these data on this slide represent only youth have been committed to the Department of Correction. Right now, at least at IYI, and I know that Julie and the commission is working on this, we don't know what happens to kids who are committed to local or county jails or local programs. We only receive data for kids that are in the state system. So youth who are in the county system, it's kind of a black box at this point. But when we do look at the state data, even though looking at the raw numbers, you can see overall white, we do see a higher number of white youth being committed to juvenile justice facilities. When we look at the overall percentage, we again see disproportionality. So overall, Black youth comprise 33.5% of youth who were committed to a state facility. Hispanic youth was 7.8%. White youth 49.1%, and then all other, which would include Asian, Timor races, American Indian, 9.5%. And again, thinking of Indiana's population as a whole, when we have about 11.3% of our youth under 18 who are Black, when we see a subset of that at 33% of youth committed who are Black, that's where we see that's a big red flag for data nerds, I would say. Is that's a huge swing in terms of disproportionality, that we're not seeing alignment between the overall population representation and the population representation in this subset. So looking at recidivism, and so this is youth who return, usually for a new infraction. We can see the recidivism rates based on 1 year out, 2 years out, and then 3 years out. And at 3 years, we see about 30% or almost 1 in 3 youth will return to the justice system at 3 years out from when they left at least the juvenile justice system. And as you can see, 1 year out, it's less, and then it slowly increases in terms of potential recidivism as the time gets there. Yes.
I just wanted to flag to the commission a brand new paper that I just emailed to Julie that was released. Maybe you saw it. Youth enrolled in restorative justice programs had like a 44% reduction in recidivism that even lasted 4 years out from the study point. So I'm sure the juvenile justice task force.
Yes, absolutely. We do have some of those programs. JDAI, it's very popular in our state and doing some good work. In addition, what I've seen in terms of research, in addition to restorative justice, high quality education and employment is the best way to prevent recidivism. And the thing that I will continue to scream from the rooftops is in December, the federal government lifted the ban on people who are incarcerated or formerly incarcerated from receiving federal grants and loans for higher education, also known as second chance Pell. So youth as well as adults, but I'm IYI, so I'm going to focus on the youth. But youth who are justice involved or formerly justice involved, we would heavily advocate that they start filling out the FAFSA to be able to access Pell grants as well as federal loans, so that they can enroll in any kind of post-secondary education. And Pell grants, federal loans can be used for certifications, credentials, as well as a 2 or 4 year degree. So this is a new revelation that the federal government allowed now this flexibility in December through the CARES Act. And if we could have more of our youth who are justice involved or formerly justice involved access this, we may be able to see some of these numbers decrease. So final slide is just looking at recidivism rates within 3 years by race. We can see kind of that highest percentage is other, given that DOC does not define what other includes. So again, that could be 2 or more races, Asian, American Indian. That is where we're seeing the highest recidivism rates at 36% in 2020. Our other racial categories, which again, this is a positive, are clustered together. So we're not seeing disproportionality in that sense with the recidivism rates from our youth. So that is a positive, even though overall, we do have some work to do in terms of our juvenile justice system. The recidivism rate does have I'm happy to end on a positive note. So with that, I'm happy to entertain any additional questions, and thank you so much again for the opportunity to present today.
Thank you, Alicia.
Thank you so much.
You've made a list. Great. I think we're now on track for what was initially previewed, our equity, inclusion, and cultural competence. Brittany Simmons and Tyler Mays.
So
Oh.
I'm just going to quickly introduce the topic and then turn it over to Brittany and Tyler.
Okay.
So this presentation we're about to have, again, kind of refresh for those of you who've been here for a while, new information for those who are new. Our equity committee last year, I think it was in June of 2020, presented to you all a tool for doing an equity analysis of a policy, right? And it included 7 questions. And the idea was to take a look at these policies and ask ourselves these questions that would help us better understand the impact of that policy on different groups of kids. And so at the time, we showed you an example, the committee showed you an example of applying that policy actually to school retention, which was something we just talked about, and how that policy could be made more equitable. So what we have today, what Brittany and Tyler are going to present to you is another example of applying those 7 questions to a policy from Youth Justice, which is related to probation. So again, that equity tool with the 7 questions, it's available on the commission's website on the tools and resources page. These are the 7 questions here. I'm going to leave that up for a minute while our speakers come up, but these are the 7 questions we recommend. We all ask ourselves either if we're creating a policy or if we're reviewing policies that we already have in place, to really think about how might this impact different groups of people that aren't necessarily at the table. So that's just a kind of a refresh in where we're going, and then we'll have Brittany and Tyler explain the example of justice.
Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you, Julie, for the introduction. Thank you to the commission for allowing us to present today. And thank you to the Equity, Inclusion, and Cultural Competence Committee for creating the framework we'll be using today. My name is Tyler Mason, and I'm with the Indiana Office of Court Services, JDI State Team. Also along with me today is Brittany Simmons, also with the JDI State Team. As a quick reminder, JDAI is Indiana's Youth Justice Improvement Model, and it's implementing in some fashion in 37 Indiana counties, which accounts for 73% of Indiana's population between the ages of 10 and 17. As a general reminder, as Julie set me up there, the framework we'll be using today was first introduced to the commission back in June 2020. And this was on the education policy, as she mentioned. The JDI State Team was asked to provide an example of this guide in action on the youth justice system. Our team focused on standard probation conditions, since this is relevant in all 92 counties, regardless if they are a JDI site or not. As you see on the slide, these are the 7 questions we answered and applied the framework during our review. We won't walk through each of these questions verbatim, but know each of these questions are addressed within our presentation. As a general reminder, as Julie said, you can access this framework on the commission's website under tools and resources. And again, it can be applied to any rule, any policy, or any procedure. So for today's purpose, we are focusing on 1 standard probation condition. For clarification, most courts in Indiana order a set of conditions at the time of disposition. This would be the juvenile court system word for sentencing. These standard conditions are ordered for every youth placed on probation, regardless of the offense the offense the youth committed, or the outcomes of any assessment tools that identify the risk for reoffense or the needs of the group. Just to gather a sense of whom in this room has seen a standard condition of probation, could you raise your hand? Okay, so just a couple. Thank you. Appreciate it. Next slide. The sample probation condition you see on the screen and on your handout is one that we'll be reviewing. I'll read that for you now. You shall attend school regularly and obey all school regulations. Suspension and expulsion from school is a violation of this rule. If you are not attending school, you may be required to seek and maintain employment as directed by your probation officer. I want to hone on and focus on a couple points that we'll break down throughout our presentation. And that's obey all school regulations. The suspension and expulsions is a violation piece. And lastly, the piece on you're required to maintain employment as directed by your probation. As we review this condition through the lens of the framework, I want to bring your attention to an article which was set up nicely on the disparities gap with those in-school and out-of-school suspensions. So based on a report that was written by IYI for the 1920 school year, this was released in March 2021, it was identified that Black students in Indiana are 3 times more likely to receive an out-of-school suspension and 2 times more likely to receive an in-school suspension of their peers of other races and ethnicities. So as we walk you through this framework, keep this in mind, particularly when we reference what was the intent of the rule versus what's the impact of the rule. Next slide. So if we remember on the guide, there's this piece on status quo. This is part of the framework where you would review the identified rule, policy, or practice and discover on the surface it seems well intended. But when utilizing the framework, the underlying issues are then identified. Why it isn't. Just like the condition we are reviewing today, on the surface it seems well intended. However, when we apply the equity lens, as Brittany will later in the presentation, this lens will highlight places that when you dig deeper into this condition, there's the opportunity for unintended consequences. So hang on tight, let's dig in. First up, bullet number 1. Data not routinely collected or reviewed. What we often come across is no data being collected on conditions of probation. If data is collected, often what occurs is the data isn't being reviewed by the aggravating impact it may be having. Also, the specific condition that a youth may be violating isn't reviewed as well. And then furthermore, it's not being disaggregated by race, ethnicity, gender, age, etc. So what this looks like in practice, just to give you all a sense, is you would first review the data on the number of violations that have been filed with the court. You would then filter that down and identify what specific condition is most often filed. You would then pare it down further and review it based on the race, ethnicity, and gender, and age to identify what groups of youth are impacted. And then identify reasons why this condition is most likely to be referred to the court. Now, this is just one example of how you may apply. Next, this is a standard probation condition. As I mentioned at the start of this presentation, this condition on the surface seems well intended, but it could have an unintended consequence, particularly around implicit bias. What I mean by this is that this rule can be subjective in nature by the attitudes and or behavior as it relates to school regulations and obtaining employment. Meaning, if I'm a probation officer, I may enforce it one way, but Brittany may enforce it another way based on her own lived experiences and perspectives on how the condition should be enforced. Next, it doesn't allow youth and family input. We can assume that this condition was developed by individuals not impacted by this condition. We also considered when this condition was developed, how long has it been since it's been reviewed? In addition, this condition is a blanket condition regardless of the severity of the offense or accounting for the individual needs of the youth. Oftentimes, these conditions are reviewed and provided at a probation appointment, not conducive to the youth and family, since it is likely to review with the youth and family during those traditional business hours. Next, the intent is for the youth to attend school and or gain employment versus what is the impact. I again want to acknowledge the status quo with this condition and how it is likely the impact wasn't accounted for. Make no mistake, I'm sure those that developed this condition were well intended, because of course we want you to attend school without disruption. No one's going to argue that. But not reviewing the impact and not asking the questions on what could be the reasons why the youth is falling short, we have to ask ourselves this question. Does the youth have an educational need not being met? Is there transportation issues, which also could be an issue when seeking and maintaining employment? Is it possible the youth doesn't have access to clean clothes? Or does the youth and family have barriers to being able to buy uniforms for both school and work? Is the youth being bullied at school? And many others were identified in our review as a team. Lastly, deeper system involvement. When we utilize the framework, we found this condition could have the potential to increase the length of time on probation for not doing well or not gaining employment, which could then lead to violations of probation happening. And believe it or not, this could also lead to being securely detained for a violation. And lastly, it could place an additional financial burden on the youth. Next up, Brittany will be reviewing the framework with the equity consideration rates. And I want to propose a couple questions to keep in mind as she walks you through this. What do you see as being the connection to public safety with this condition? Does and could this condition create more harm than good? How does this condition help promote behavior change? And when you consider these questions, remember that the intent of this condition is good, but the impacts may not have been accounted for.
All right, thank you, Tyler. So I am going to walk through the equity considerations. As Tyler mentioned, we used those 7 questions when we reviewed this specific probation condition. So our first equity consideration is develop the capacity to collect the data. So this would allow us to collect data on a regular, ongoing basis. So while we're currently only discussing one probation condition today, It's generally one among a list of many others. So we want to be able to collect the data on each individual probation condition to see the impact and what, if any, groups may be impacted negatively. And so what I mean specifically is about collecting the data on the court or probation's response to the violation. So when probation violations are filed with the court, the probation officer has to name the condition that was violated, as well as the nature of the violation. So did the youth violate the probation condition because they weren't attending school regularly? Was it for not following school regulations? Was it due to a suspension or an expulsion? Or for not seeking and maintaining employment? So our second equity consideration is to analyze the data by demographic variables. So looking at data through an equity lens is disaggregating the data by race, ethnicity, gender, age, geography, and among a list of many others. So what this means is analyzing who is being brought back to the court and having this specific condition be the nature of the violation. So we want to know the number of kids being brought back to court for violating this specific condition and the characteristics of those youth. So is it more oftentimes that we see youth of color being brought back for violating this condition, youth with specific diagnoses like conduct disorder? Is it youth within a specific age range, or is it males over females? Could it be from a particular school or school district, or a location within the community? Our third equity consideration is to consider the reading level and potential language barriers. And so are we even considering how the rule is written? What words are being used? Is it written using age and developmentally appropriate language? Is it going to be clear to kids who may not speak English as their primary or first language? Or youth who have different abilities, whether those be intellectual, developmental? How are we ensuring that the conditions are clear to all youth? We would recommend that when developing the language for standard probation conditions, special conditions, or any information that's built into an individualized plan for the youth, is to allow young people to help draft the language. That's one way to ensure that it's clear to them, they understand what is being asked and required. A fourth consideration is to partner with youth and family to develop a case plan. So this not only empowers the youth and family to have a voice and the conditions that they're subjected to, but it also helps to build rapport and build buy-in with families. It allows them to give their thoughts and their input on the needs of their child and their family. It also allows probation to work beside the youth and family to identify any potential barriers to adhering to this probation condition, as well as to brainstorm solutions to address potential barriers with the youth and family's input. Developing an individual place plan with the youth and family also allows it to be tailored to that youth, to that family, so we can help to ensure that the conditions are relevant to the youth's needs, their risks, and the reason for system involvement. This type of engagement work with youth and families can take many forms. It could be surveys, focus groups, the development of youth and family advisory boards. One way to ensure that families feel comfortable sharing feedback and feel protected for responding to potential areas of inequity is to do the surveys anonymously, or to partner with a community-based agency that already have relationships with the youth and family as a way to obtain the feedback. There are a lot of formal and informal resources available that help set youth and family up for success to be part of the solutions. An additional consideration is around role clarification. So whose role is it to ensure that a youth is successful in school? Is it probation? Is it the school? Is it the youth and family? Or is it the community? We suggest it's a collaborative approach among all of those. We know that when youth enter the youth justice system, they're likely struggling somewhere or have made poor impulsive decisions. But the question is, when the court is the one to enforce things that are not related to public safety, this is when we see the potential for deeper system involvement. So if youth enters the youth justice system for stealing the car, they may or may not be struggling at school. But if they're subjected to this particular probation condition, it could drive the youth deeper into the system for a school-related issue when that isn't the reason for initial system involvement. We could also be seeing positive changes with this youth on probation, but because they're subjected to the same conditions of all other youth, This youth could be violated for something that could have been an isolated incident at the school. Intent versus impact. So Tyler talked a lot about this. So equity considerations would basically allow us to be very intentional about our intent upfront and understanding the impact that we may be having. So we all know the benefit of school attendance. We want kids to attend school, to not disrupt, and to not create distractions for other youth. We know it's in the best interest of not only the child, but also the community. I think the question is there potential harm that can come from this probation condition that would overshadow our original intent? As the justice system, our primary responsibility is public safety. So as Tyler asked, what is the connection to public safety with this particular probation condition? Does merely having this as a standard probation condition among a list of many others ensure that the youth's going to attend school and obey all school regulations just simply because it's a condition? Are we taking into consideration some of those underlying issues, reasons, or barriers that would contribute to why youth isn't attending? Transportation issues, unmet medical or educational needs, mental health issues. Similarly, are we considering reasons that a youth may not be able to seek and maintain employment? They could be at home in the evenings and weekends assisting with childcare if their parents are working. Do they have access to clothing and uniforms that may be required either by the school or by a job? Is having a job in the best interest of that particular youth, especially would consider all of the other things that may be court ordered, court hearings, probation appointments, counseling, community service hours, or any other pro-social activities the youth may be involved in? Or can this condition create additional barriers for youth and families? Accountability is another equity consideration. It is also the other primary responsibility of the youth justice system. Accountability should look different for youth based on what we know about brain science and positive youth development. Are we clear as a community, as a probation department, and as a youth justice system about the purpose of probation? So JDI embraces transforming youth probation using research-based, age and developmentally appropriate ways to respond that have proven to be effective in promoting behavior change. How can we address behavior change in a supportive and goal-based way versus the traditional compliance-based probation systems? How can we support an individualized probation and the probation conditions to help youth succeed? Again, specifically as it relates to their risk, their needs, and the reason for system involvement. Our last equity consideration is community engagement and supports. So how do we partner with the youth, with the schools, and with the community to hold youth accountable without involving the youth justice system? What else can we do to better meet their needs? Can we work together as a community to identify, build, and invest in options in the community to respond in a non-youth justice system way, specifically knowing what we know about the school disciplines data that you all heard about, school discipline disparity data that you guys have all heard about today. It would take engaging with community partners and collaborating with the schools to ensure that youth are successful and have the appropriate and relevant resources to help address the underlying barriers and issues that were identified both by the youth as well as through our data. This could be connections to community mentor programs, critical messenger programs, creating community diversion options, and just connecting youth to agencies who can best ensure that their basic needs are being met. At the end of the day, we don't want you to overcomplicate using the framework. Have collaborative discussions, engage with those most impacted, listen to them, and incorporate their feedback in the process. It's really about building this collaborative culture of inquiry. Again, being very clear about our intent and ensuring that our intent aligns with the outcomes that we see. The more we use this framework, it allows us to build our capacity and get more comfortable with looking at this work through an equity lens and allows us to incorporate this process into everything we do and how we do our business. I'll close by sharing our recommendation to incorporate equity using a strength-based approach. So on the left, you see the original probation condition, and on the right, you see our recommendation with equity considered.
We would propose that the gold standard is not that this would be included as a standard probation condition, but instead would be built into a court order that allows probation and trust probation to do what they do. Allow them to work collaboratively with the youth team, who at minimum would include the schools, the parents, family, and probation, but also other supportive people in that kid's life. It could be coaches, mentors, neighbors, to develop an educational plan that meets the needs of that youth and identifies the necessary supports for success, not only on probation, but once they're released from the justice system as well. Our contact information is on the slide. If you have any additional questions. And I just want to thank you for your time today. And we are happy to take any questions if you all have any.
I think I'm gonna go back to what I was saying
Hey,
earlier.
Dea, can you use the microphone?
Can you hear me better? I guess I was just saying, I'm gonna take it back to what I was saying earlier, the education on racism. And the reason why I'm gonna continue to go back there is because as a state, I feel like it's important to be aware of our roots. Have you guys ever heard the saying, like, if you don't know your history, you're gonna repeat it? And I just think it's very, very important for us to be aware of the systems how the systems came into place and when they came into place. Ancestral trauma is a thing. Ancestral trauma is trauma passed down generation from generation and then reenacted. Sometimes, I guess I'm just saying, like, say if we have this racism training, right? And child advocates did a really good job at not only paying attention to the history of the state, but paying attention to what systems do we still use today that was in place when systems was only made to benefit one particular race, or just, systems was made to benefit not everybody, I guess is what I'm saying. And I feel like it's very, very, very important, because say if I'm a judge, right? But if I'm not aware, if I just see on the surface level, this child stole a car, I may not be aware of the root issue. There's lack somewhere, whether I want to be aware of that or not. If I'm not aware, I'm just not. If no one has taught me, just like with anything, if no one teaches someone something, they don't know it. So I just think it's really important, because then as a judge, they have power. They have power to determine what systems or like services the youth and the family may need. So even as a judge, I feel like it would be important for them to just have training in general. So that way we are focusing on the root of the issue. Say if a child doesn't need a probation officer, but a mentor, like you guys said, as a judge, I would be able to see that. And then that way I'm not giving out services that doesn't fit that family specifically. I just feel like it's very important. If we're going to talk about equity, we see in these numbers with children that it's not equal, it's highly unequal. And so all of us have very important roles and positions that together we can change that. We truly can change that. But I feel like if we don't highlight that part of it, it'll continue to not be seen, and it'll continue to be and of course it's probably not on purpose, but looked over. And I feel like then we'll continue to see the numbers the way that we do, because we didn't address the root of the issue. And just going back to, like I said, the history of our state, just the history of our state, in order to make sure we aren't having disparities in our numbers, focusing on the root of the issue and how far we've come as a state, but still how far we have to go.
I think it's a great point. I think you punctuated, sort of emphasized, I think, why you all were trying to take one example, probation, and some of the rules therein, and add that lens to it. And that's why I believe, I know we created this task force to drive a lot of the work and continue to bring us examples of that. And the next one might be what you talked about earlier, which is the teacher training and its correlation in certain areas to driving those expulsion numbers down by race. And so those are just one, I think that's one, you got to the root of why we have this work. And so we'll continue to bring, as you all bring to us, the equity and cultural competence task force forward. And I think we just found a new volunteer for the task force as well to help steer their efforts and what we want to see as a commission as far as what's underneath those numbers, because otherwise you're right, they're just numbers. And until you make practical changes and really explore practically what's happening on the ground, it's hard to make that decisions, direct policy, other action items. So
Digging into the solution that you've provided here specifically, which is with the youth in the lead, a team will work together to create a plan that will support success at a school and or job. You mentioned it briefly. Who do you envision to be on that team?
So I think our recommendation would be at minimum, school, probation, and the family and the youth.
I think that expectation is really important. We keep coming back to school, school, school. It is all. It's gonna take everyone. So it's really important at the local level that the school, that the local judge, and that the right people are at the table. And I just got an email from Justice Stephen David, who I met with. I think that the JD, we have so many acronyms in this world. JDAI, you all report right to him. And he talked about the reason it's not scaled throughout the state is because it has to be locally driven. It must be locally driven, leaders at the table. And so I just appreciate that the educators and the judge and others will be at the table, focused on solution locally for the individual child. So thank you for presenting a solution that could be helpful.
thank you. Any other questions?
Yes, John. Tyler and Brittany, I appreciate your work on this. It's a complex issue. And I think if as we move forward with this example, I would encourage involving juvenile court judges and juvenile probation. I think that's very important. Because the data piece is so important, and you guys highlight that. Through CSG, we found that we really need to focus on data, and so I think that will help inform us on the scope of the issues as we move forward. I think context also is important in this conversation. The juvenile justice system is all focused on connecting youth and family with the services and the help that they need. And that's a collective approach starting with the judges, probation department, prosecutors working with the public defenders. So we're all on the same track in terms of how can we help youth in these situations. Because with the context of this, there are terms of probation, but at the end of the day, a judge has a lot of discretion as to what happens next if there is a second encounter. Youth and family are represented by counsel. They do have a voice throughout the process. So I just wanted to provide a little bit of that context. I think that's important that we all have that same goal. Most of the work that prosecutors do in this area is helping with services that youth and family need. So, but I appreciate you bringing this to the commission.
Thank you. Thank you both. Next up, we've got any other items, I guess, to raise from commission members. I think we've had a pretty active discussion all the way through, but I see Director Jackson raising his hand.
It's my opportunity to filibuster for just a little bit. You often hear about the lack of a father figure in the homes of a lot of these children that we're talking about. And I was wondering if we could have Youth Institute kind of see what data they could find to kind of there's correlation between children that we're talking about and the lack of whether it's a male figure in the home or a positive male figure in the home, and how we might, one, I guess, if the data does pan out that there's definitely a correlation there, how we might actually try to, I guess, strengthen those situations and kind of look at it, maybe instead of kind of turning so much of our attention to the children for a moment, kind of turn our attention to the fathers for a moment and see how we might focus on strengthening them for the benefit of the children.
Yeah, I know there's some research out there on that, so I'm sure that they can gather that information for us.
Alicia has her computer open, so I'm sure she's taking copious notes and adding to the list. So I think that's a great point, and just understanding what's going on beneath the numbers again, to explore what we're providing children and their families. It's great. Thank you, Director Jackson.
My pleasure.
Anything else? Representative Vaughn?
Sorry, I just kind of want to add to that a little bit and throw out wherever I can. You know, the commission and most of our agencies tend to be reactive to issues in the culture and our environment. But we're always trying to correct it, right? And give people a hand up and that stuff, and that's all good. But what are we doing to stop the cycle? So I know Daya, when I first met her, that was her big issue. How do we stop it? What are we doing preventative wise? And I know, Julie, you got a thought on, is the commission really doing its job, and what are we being productive and we being useful, right? So I guess I just want to encourage us to kind of look at, are we trying to stop the cycle? Are we just reacting to the circumstances that are around us? So if there's a way to get preventative, right? How do we strengthen families? How do we help kids that come from this environment that creates these kids going to jail or detention or foster care? You know, how do we stop that, right? How does everybody come from a loving household? And what are we doing about it? So I know we put a lot of pressure on our teachers, but a lot of times the classroom is the only safe place these kids have, right? So can we start that discussion on what life's supposed to look like in the classroom? Maybe, I don't know. I'm just thinking out loud a little bit. So I just want to throw that out there. So.
I would add to that, this is multifaceted. If we could just throw a solution at this, we would have done that long ago. And it kind of hits on what you're saying. There's a lot of research, and I'm glad that you brought that up too, Zach. There's a lot of research about the family unit and parents and the support that kids have. I think we need to really zoom out and make sure we're looking at the full multifaceted picture before we just throw solutions. I was gonna say at the wall, I was trying to think of a better word, but yeah, I mean, throw solutions there. So I appreciate your point about, let's also look at the family support as we really drop towards some solutions. I appreciate the solution today because of the team at the table, the educator, the judge, the family or support unit led by the child, because they have to have the personal responsibility to drive their destiny as well and feel empowered to do so.
Thank you, Dr. Jenner. Anyone else?
And then just going back to what does a healthy human being needs to survive in this world, and the systems that we have in place, do they support that? Going back to generational curses or like ancestral trauma, if me as a child, if I don't have an example of what a healthy human if I don't have an example of, back to what he was saying, a healthy father figure or a healthy mother figure, there is no way, shape, or form that I'm going to know how to do that out of thin air. All kids need an example. And going back to being educated on how the development of a mind, going back to the development of the mind of a child. And creating safe environments for those children to thrive in, and making sure that we as systems help. I guess I feel like the systems that we have now sort of take like this an authoritative approach And with that authoritative approach, it sort of isn't like inclusive. Somebody's gonna feel lack, and if a person feel lack, she won't get their full potential. And full potential is needed on all sides in order for us to come to this common ground. So I guess going back to teachers, even doctors, who are the main people in a child's first earliest stages of life? And then what I learned too, like the first 7 years of life, that kind of determines who you will be. So just making sure that we as systems, we support, and not families, but children in their first earlier stages of life. So then we don't have to worry about them even reaching our systems, you know, our juvenile systems, or even reaching our jail systems. One thing as a foster youth, I learned that there is a link between the systems, and going from one system, it's almost like automatic, you know, second nature to go to that second system. Some of them go to jail simply because it's a security, it's home, it's free food, it's that. So just making sure our systems, if we have doctors and if we have the teachers, everybody, if we start them while they're young, while they're still children, and everybody that plays roles in that child life is supportive, then I think that our goals will be a little bit more closer to reaching our goals of equity, that equity piece, I guess.
Yeah, I think you touch on a lot of what our work has been up to this point, and really, if Dr. Fox was here, she would have chimed in about what we call our OB Navigator program, but basically, what are we providing for services, doctors and others from birth on and for the mother.
Okay.
And then you see the focus on early childhood education, which has been another focus. So really, you hit on
Literacy by 3rd grade, you did that, the early intervention, the preventative, is what you're hitting on.
that 7-year window. I'd say a lot of our work, certainly since Julie's been on, or I've been involved in this commission, been focused on that age group. And so then the value, I think you're providing, the questions you're raising on practical piece, what are they trained with? What are the tools that are at their disposal? Because that is who you interact with as the child, is something that we're focused on, certainly with that age group, the programs related to it, but then I think the practical reality of it is how is it working with the children that are actually having an experience with those individuals, doctors, teachers, etc. So I think you've kind of, we started to see some fertile ground, I think, for some future topics that we could probably discuss with Chief Justice and other members to bring forward as possible considerations based off this discussion today. So I think most of it's stemming off of some of the research that we saw. So we'll try to get more granular on some of the questions that commission members have raised, and try to bring something up for consideration for our next meeting, which brings me to the last piece of our agenda, which is, I think, October 20th is our next meeting. So we're doing this quarterly, and we now, I think, have some opportunities to discuss our next topics. We all try to stay within a 2-hour window, so that's, as you can tell, a bit of a challenge. But I think I'm up for it, at least for the next 2 meetings. I have to hand the baton off. So with that, I think, do I have a motion to adjourn? So moved. All right, second. Adjourn. All right. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Yep. Welcome.